All right, so there was a hearing yesterday, really over the last couple of days, and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin was questioned by members of Congress. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, was questioned, and this hearing was the epitome of showboating and grandstanding to no benefit whatsoever of the American people, full stop. There's barely more of there's almost no additional analysis to do other than many of these members of Congress really have no business being in Congress, and you'll very quickly figure out which individuals those are. Much of the hearing was meant to just provide a cartoonish opportunity for people like Matt Gaetz and others to demand and or request that General Mark Milley resign. And they couched it as being related to Afghanistan, although the topic of Mark Milley having to sort of reassure China that Trump is not going to just bomb you in the last few days of his presidency. That's a story that we learned about as a result of this book by Carol Leonnig and Philip Brucker, I believe it is. Let's just get right into the clips. It's really amazing. Here is Congressman Joe Wilson, who calls for President Joe Biden to resign. Just countless calls for resignations during these hearings.
Buck stops with 13 murdered Marines. Mr. Biden is disregarding the military advice, and I believe the president should resign.
I'm prepared to begin my questions, Mr.
I believe the president should resign. Everybody should resign, according to these hearings. Then, and this is actually really important, Milley actually explains what it was that led him to communicate with Chinese officials in those final days of the Trump presidency. And Congressman Hartzler, Republican from Missouri, says Milley should resign. Look at this.
Others, that the Chinese thought wrongly that the United States was going to attack them. I am certain, guaranteed certain, that President Trump had no intent to attack. And it was my task to make sure I communicated that. And the purpose was to de-escalate, calm things down.
You shared all that earlier, I understand.
And as part of that...
Just say, did you or did you
not?
Sorry,
and I think I said Congressman Hartzler. It's Congresswoman Hartzler. I think I misspoke before.
Tell him that if we were going to attack, you would let him know.
As part of that conversation, I said, General Lee, there's not going to be a war, there's not going to be attack between great powers. And if there was, the tensions would build up. There'd be calls going back and forth from all kinds of senior officials. I said, hell, General Lee, I'll probably give you a call, but we're not going to attack you. Trust me, we're not going to attack you. These are two great powers, and I am doing my best to transmit the president's intent.
So understand that the right wants to frame what Milley did as some kind of treason by calling China and saying, we're not going to attack you no matter what, which then would be a signal to China, hey, the U.S. isn't going to attack us no matter what. Now it's a carte blanche for us to do stuff. What Milley is explaining is he called and he said, listen, in these last few days, Trump's not going to just start dropping random bombs on you. If we were going to get into a military conflict, there would be an escalation. We would be talking the way that things happen. There would be threats. There would be an escalation. That is obviously not the treason that the right wants to make it out to be. But Hartzler doesn't care.
Intent to ensure that the American people are protected from an incident that could escalate.
I understand your intent, but I think you articulating that you would tell him, you would give him a call, I think is worthy of your resignation. I just think that's against our country, that you would give our number one adversary that information and tell him that.
These people, they're either idiots or they're pretending, but there's just nothing there. I don't know how else to say it. Then Matt Gaetz gets involved and it gets even more embarrassing.
February 26, 2020, House Armed Services Committee, General Mark Milley. We know we're not going to defeat the Taliban militarily, and they're not going to defeat the government of Afghanistan militarily. You really blew that call, didn't you, General?
I believe that that was a issue of strategic stalemate, and that if we had remained in Afghanistan with the advisory levels of effort, then the government of Afghanistan...
Well, that's an interesting answer to a question. It's just not one I asked. You spent more time with Bob Woodward on this book than you spent analyzing the very likely prospect that the Afghanistan government was going to fall immediately to the Taliban, didn't you?
Not even close, Congressman.
Oh, really? Because you said right after Kabul fell that no one could have anticipated the immediate fall of the Ghani government. When did you become aware that Joe Biden tried to get Ghani to lie about the conditions in Afghanistan? He did that in July. Did you know that right away?
I'm not aware of what President Biden...
You're not aware of the phone call that Biden had with Ghani where he said, whether it is true or not, we want you to go out there and paint a rosy picture of what's going on in Afghanistan. You're the chief military advisor to the president. You said that the Taliban was not going to defeat the government of Afghanistan militarily, which, by the way, they cut through them like a hot knife through butter.
It was just endlessly like this. Just Gaetz is horrible. And then Gaetz mentions as an aside that Biden is too addled to even fire anyone, but that they shouldn't be in their positions. It gets crazy.
But you said yesterday that you weren't going to resign when senators asked you this question. And I believe that you guys probably won't resign. You seem to be very happy failing up over there. But if we didn't have a president that was so addled, you all would be fired, because that is what you deserve. You have let down the people who wear the uniform in my district and all around this country, and you're far more interested in what your perception is and how people think about you in Insider Washington books than you care about winning,
Gentleman's
which this
time
group
has
is incapable
expired.
of doing.
Ms. Houlihan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And gentlemen, I apologize for the behavior of my colleague.
It's just grandstanding. This does nothing to move forward the interests of the American people or of the United States as a country globally. In this next clip, Donald Trump's former doctor, Ronnie Jackson, who's now a member of Congress, also getting Milley completely exasperated.
General Milley, will you now resign?
I serve at the pleasure of the president, Mr. Jackson.
Congressman Pat Fallon from Texas asking Milley about his comments about that horribly botched drone strike in Afghanistan, and of course taking them completely out of context.
And General Milley, on September 1st, 3 days later, you described it as a righteous strike. People that were not supposed to be killed were killed, and you described it as a righteous strike.
Yeah, if you go back and look at the full quote, what I said was we followed the procedures. I had every reason to believe that we followed our procedures at that point in time. We knew that there were civilians killed. We knew there were non-combatants and there was collateral damage.
Yes, you said were others killed? Yes.
Yes.
Who were they? We don't know. We're trying to sort through all that.
Right. That's exactly what I said. And that's right. And
so
because I believed...
Kill people we shouldn't have. It was a righteous strike.
I believe that the target that we were aiming at... I believe the target we were aiming at was...
Okay,
dead.
I have three more.
And this is a strategy which is you don't even really give time to answer the questions. Now, I think I've already spoken about the botched drone strike, and it's absolutely horrifying and disgusting. But the idea that suddenly Republicans care about drone strikes and civilian deaths is laughable. And then last clip, here's the previous day. This is Senator Tom Cotton again bringing up why haven't there been resignations?
Just got one final question. General Milley, I can only conclude that your advice about staying in Afghanistan was rejected. I'm shocked to learn that your advice wasn't sought until August 25th on staying past the August 31 deadline. I understand that you're the principal military advisor, that you advise, you don't decide, the president decides. But if all this is true, General Milley, why haven't you resigned?
Senator, as a senior military officer, resigning is a really serious thing, and it's a political act if I'm resigning in protest. My job is to provide advice. My statutory responsibility is to provide legal advice or best military advice to the president, and that's my legal requirement.
So Milley having to explain to Tom Cotton sort of like how things work. We learned nothing from these hearings. What is the dollar value, the dollar cost of these hearings to just allow these Republicans to ask, why haven't you resigned, essentially, without an interest even in learning anything about what has actually taken place? Just more pathetic behavior by this modern Republican Party. One of our sponsors is Atlas VPN. In the year 2021, many computer security experts say everybody should be using a VPN whenever you connect to the internet. Atlas VPN keeps your information private from big tech companies, from your internet service provider, even from governments. Atlas VPN helps you stay protected from hackers trying to steal your data. And Atlas VPN even lets you watch shows and movies on Netflix and other streaming services you would otherwise only be able to access from other countries. I use Atlas VPN on all of my devices, phone, computer, tablet, whenever I'm connected to the internet. It's so easy to use. You sign up, install it, turn it on, and you're done. Out of sight, out of mind. You stay protected. And right now, my audience can get Atlas VPN for $1.39 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. You just have to go to atlasv.pn/Pacman. The link is right underneath this video.